Tobias Huxley had been working station security for 20 years, and he liked to think he'd seen it all. Drunken diplomats picking fights in the observation lounge? Check. Contraband smuggling through waste disposal? Oh, absolutely. That one time, a methane-breathing ambassador accidentally set off the fire suppression system in the human quarters and nearly drowned half the administrative staff? Yeah, that was a Tuesday he'd rather forget. But this was something else entirely. His boots echoed down Corridor 12K at 0300 hours, the kind of soul-crushing middle-of-the-night shift where coffee was a religious experience and every shadow looked vaguely threatening. Lighthouse Keeper Station hummed around him, all sterile white walls and soft blue emergency lighting, rotating lazily in orbit around Threshold, a contested ball of rock that 6 different species claimed as their ancestral homeland. Which meant Tobias's job was essentially babysitting the galaxy's most dysfunctional family reunion, except with more claws and fewer reasonable conversations. His handheld console chirped, a sound that never, ever meant good news at this hour. Unauthorized presence detected. Restricted Section 12K. Corvathi Nursery. Tobias stopped mid-stride, his coffee going cold in his hand. Oh no. Oh hell no. Corvathi Nursery. As in, the place where they kept 5 orphaned cubs of the galaxy's most notorious apex predators. As in, the creatures that made grown soldiers check under their beds at night. As in, territorial killing machines that could disembowel a full-grown orthax in under 6 seconds and looked like someone had taken a wolf, given it 2 extra limbs, covered it in midnight black fur with bioluminescent patterns, and then handed it a personal vendetta against everything that moved. And someone, some absolute idiot, was in there with them. Back up to Section 12K, Tobias barked into his comm, already breaking into a run. Possible breach. Possible? Oh, who am I kidding? Possible corpse. His mind raced through scenarios, none of them good. Intruder trying to steal the cubs for the black market? They'd be shredded. Some fool who didn't read the 16 warning signs posted outside? Equally shredded. Malfunction in the containment field? Everyone shredded, including him, probably. He rounded the corner, stun rifle already in hand, and hit the door controls. They didn't respond. Override code. Still nothing. His heart hammered. If the security locks were compromised, manual override. The door hissed open with agonizing slowness, revealing the nursery beyond, and Tobias's brain simply stopped processing reality for a solid 10 seconds. Because there, sprawled on the floor in a patch of absurdly cozy-looking bedding, was a human woman fast asleep. She wore maintenance coveralls, had her blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that had mostly given up on life, and was snoring softly with one arm thrown over her face. And, surrounding her, because the universe apparently had a sick sense of humor, were 5 Corvathi cubs, not attacking her, not even threatening her. They were grooming her hair. Tobias blinked, rubbed his eyes, blinked again. Nope, still there, still happening. Reality had officially gone on vacation without filing the proper paperwork. Each cub was roughly the size of a full-grown mastiff, their obsidian fur rippling with soft cyan patterns that pulsed gently in the dim nursery light. They had arranged themselves around the sleeping woman like some kind of protective honor guard, and 3 of them were taking turns very carefully running their claws through the escaped strands of her hair, untangling knots with a delicacy that should have been physically impossible for creatures with talons designed to rend armor plating. One cub, the smallest, with a distinctive white patch on its chest, had curled up directly against the woman's side, purring. Actually purring. a sound like distant thunder mixed with a diesel engine trying to achieve enlightenment. Another cub noticed Tobias and fixed him with eyes that glowed like molten gold. It made a low, chirping sound, not threatening, more like a question, like, "Hey, who's this new guy? And is he cool? Or do we need to explain personal boundaries with extreme prejudice?" "What in the—" Tobias breathed, his rifle lowering despite every training instinct screaming at him to keep it raised. His backup chose that moment to arrive. Two junior officers who skidded to a halt behind him, weapons drawn, ready for carnage, and probably already composing their resignation letters. "Sir?" Officer Klein whispered, her voice pitched somewhere between terror and total confusion. Is that a human in there?" "Yes." "With the Korvathi?" "Yes." "The murder cubs?" "Apparently they prefer grooming to murder tonight," Tobias said flatly, his mind still trying to catch up with his eyes. "New station policy I wasn't informed about, I guess." The cubs had all perked up now, aware of the additional humans at the door. They shifted, repositioning themselves closer to their sleeping. What? Friend? Pack member? Mobile napping platform? Their body language screamed protection, those luminescent patterns brightening to a more aggressive blue-white. "Should we trank them?" Klein asked, her stun rifle trembling slightly. "And risk them going berserk while protecting her?" "Hard pass." Tobias holstered his own weapon slowly, raising his hands in what he desperately hoped was a universal gesture of, "Please don't eat me. I'm mostly gristle anyway." He took one careful step into the nursery. 5 pairs of glowing eyes tracked him. 30 claws flexed in unison. "Easy," he murmured, not sure if he was talking to the cubs or himself. "Easy there, kids. I'm just here to retrieve the very stupid human who somehow isn't dead yet." The largest cub, probably the eldest, with scars already marking its muzzle from whatever hell it had survived before arriving on the station, rose to its feet. It positioned itself directly between Tobias and the sleeping woman, lips pulling back to reveal teeth that could punch through reinforced steel. "Right," Tobias said, not moving. "You've made your point. She's yours. Got it. Crystal clear." He'd read the reports, of course. Everyone had read the reports. Korvathi cubs were supposed to be even more dangerous than adults because they hadn't learned restraint yet. They'd killed 3 trained handlers on their homeworld before being shipped to Lighthouse Keeper for specialized care, which was bureaucrat speak for, "We have no idea what to do with them, but they're politically important. So let's make them someone else's problem." The cubs had been on the station for 2 months. In that time, they'd rejected every Korvathi caretaker, every automated feeding system, every attempt at enrichment or socialization. Dr. Fulton, the xenobiology lead, had submitted a report just last week recommending they be transferred to a military containment facility because they were becoming too aggressive, too unpredictable. And yet, here they were, contentedly grooming a human woman's hair like she was their long-lost mother. "Ma'am," Tobias called out, trying to keep his voice calm and non-threatening, which was difficult when discussing nap time with murder machines. "Ma'am, I need you to wake up now." The woman stirred slightly, mumbling something that sounded like 5 more minutes before rolling over. This caused her hair to spill across the smallest cub, who made a delighted chirping sound and immediately began grooming the new section with intense focus. "This is Security Chief Tobias Huxley," he tried again, louder. "You are in violation of approximately 47 different station regulations, and I need you to exit the nursery immediately." That got a response. The woman's eyes fluttered open. "Hazel," he noted absently, the kind that probably looked friendly and trustworthy under normal circumstances, which explained absolutely nothing about her current situation. She blinked up at the ceiling, then at the cubs around her, then at Tobias standing in the doorway. "Oh," she said, yawning. "Hey, is it morning already?" "Is it?" Tobias felt something inside his brain snap, just a little. "Ma'am, you are sleeping in the Corvathi nursery." She sat up slowly, scratching the smallest cub behind what passed for its ears. It leaned into her touch, purring louder. "With 5 apex predator cubs." "Well, yeah." She said this like he was the crazy one, like he was the person who needed to have reality explained to him slowly using small words. "They could kill you." "They could," she agreed pleasantly, "but they won't. Will you, babies?" This last part was directed at the cubs in a baby talk voice that should have resulted in immediate mauling. Instead, all 5 of them made chirping, trilling sounds that were downright affectionate. Tobias pinched the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am, I need your name and your explanation for why you're in a restricted area. And it better be really, really good." "Diana," the woman said, standing up and brushing off her coveralls. The cubs stood with her, maintaining their protective formation. "Diana Hunt. I'm with maintenance. Night shift." "Maintenance?" "Yep. Night shift." "That's what I said." "And you're in the murder cub nursery because—" Diana looked at him like he was being deliberately obtuse. "They were crying." Silence. Tobias waited for the rest of the explanation. It didn't come. "They were crying," he repeated slowly. "2 weeks ago. I was doing rounds in this section. Heard them through the door. They sounded scared." She shrugged. "So I came in." "You just came in?" "Into the restricted Corvathi nursery, where the warning signs explicitly state that unauthorized entry will result in death and/or dismemberment." "Well, nobody had been dismembered yet when I wrote those signs," Officer Klein muttered from the doorway. Diana crossed her arms. "They're babies, scared babies who'd lost their parents. What was I supposed to do? Leave them crying?" "Yes!" Tobias and Klein shouted in unison. The cubs didn't appreciate the volume. They pressed closer to Diana, their bioluminescent patterns shifting to aggressive red, growls rumbling from 5 throats simultaneously. Diana immediately made a series of clicking sounds, actual Corvathi vocalizations, Tobias realized with mounting horror, and the cubs settled down, though they kept their glowing eyes fixed on the security officers. "You speak Corvathi," Tobias said faintly. "Little bit. Enough for calm down, good job, and please don't eat that." Diana smiled, scratching the scarred cub under its chin. It melted into her touch like an oversized, deadly kitten. "I've been learning." "You've been—" Tobias couldn't finish the sentence. His brain had officially given up on making sense of anything. "How long have you been coming here?" 2 weeks, give or take, every night shift." "Every night?" "They need consistency," Diana said matter-of-factly. "Routine helps with trauma recovery." Behind Tobias, Klein whispered, "Is she a xenopsychologist or something?" "Maintenance," Tobias corrected numbly. "She's maintenance." "Well, I used to run a wildlife rehabilitation center back on Montana," Diana offered. "Before I took this job. Figured it couldn't be that different." "Couldn't be that—" Tobias decided right then that he needed a vacation. A long one. Possibly forever. "Ma'am, these are Corvathi. Not raccoons, not orphaned deer. These are the most dangerous predators in this sector of space." Diana's expression shifted, something hard and protective entering her eyes. These are orphaned children who watched their parents die. They're traumatized, grieving, and everyone treats them like weapons instead of kids. She looked down at the cubs clustered around her legs. So yeah, I came back. Every night. Because somebody should. And there it was. The absolute conviction of someone who'd decided that rules were suggestions and death was a risk worth taking for the right reasons. Tobias had seen that look before, usually right before someone did something spectacularly heroic or spectacularly stupid, with very little difference between the two. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me," he said, aiming for firm but landing somewhere around exhausted. "We need to have a conversation about this in my office, without the murder cubs." "They're not—" "Without," Tobias emphasized, "the cubs." Diana looked torn, glancing down at the 5 sets of glowing eyes watching her expectantly. She clicked something in Korvathi. Tobias caught what might have been, "I'll be back," and the cubs, miraculously, sat down in formation. She walked toward the door, and the cubs made distressed sounds but didn't follow. They'd been trained. She'd actually trained them to let her leave. Tobias stepped aside to let her pass, then paused at the threshold, looking back at 5 apex predators sitting obediently like they were waiting for their favorite person to return from the grocery store. "Sir?" Klein prompted. "Should we lock the door?" "It was locked," Tobias said, noting the override panel hanging open, wires exposed. She bypassed it. "I'm good with electronics," Diana called back cheerfully from the corridor. Of course she was. Of course. Tobias followed her out, the door sealing behind them with a hiss that felt like the universe trying to contain its own confusion. Through the reinforced window, he could see the cubs clustering at the door, their patterns flickering anxiously. This was going to be a nightmare of paperwork. Reports to file, protocols to review, probably several committee meetings about security clearances and species interaction guidelines. But first, he needed to understand how a human maintenance worker had done the impossible, befriending creatures that killed trained professionals, and why she'd risked her life every night for 2 weeks to comfort them. Also, he really, really needed more coffee. "After you," he said to Diana, gesturing down the corridor. "And just so we're clear, you're in a stupendous amount of trouble." Diana glanced back at the nursery door one more time, at the cubs watching through the window, and smiled. "Worth it." "Yeah." Tobias suspected she was right, even if it meant his blood pressure would never recover. Tobias's office was a monument to bureaucratic chaos, file screens stacked on every surface, half-empty coffee mugs forming their own ecosystem, and one wall entirely dedicated to incident reports that he'd stopped pretending to organize sometime around the 3rd year of his assignment. He gestured Diana into the chair across from his desk, noting how she sat with the kind of relaxed confidence that suggested she either didn't grasp the severity of her situation or simply didn't care. He was betting on the latter. "So," Tobias said, dropping into his own chair with a creak of protest from the joints. His or the furniture's, hard to say. "Let's start with the obvious question. How are you still alive?" Diana tilted her head, considering. "Good bone density? Healthy cardiovascular system? Pure spite?" "I'm being serious." "So am I." But she relented at his expression, leaning forward with her elbows on her knees. "I listened to them. First night I came in, sat down about 3 meters from their sleeping area, and just waited. Didn't approach, didn't make sudden moves. Let them come to me. And they just came? Not immediately. Took about an hour. The little one with the white patch, I call her Pip. She was the first. Crept over, sniffed my hand, decided I wasn't a threat." Diana's expression softened. Or maybe decided I was sad and lonely enough to be Pack. Tobias pulled up the surveillance footage on his main screen, scrubbing back through 2 weeks of night shift recordings. There, timestamp 14 days ago, 03:20 hours. Diana entering the nursery, sitting cross-legged on the floor, patient as stone, while 5 sets of luminous eyes watched her from the shadows. "You kept coming back," he muttered, watching her nightly visits play out in fast-forward. Every single shift. "They needed me to." The footage showed progression that should have been impossible. Night 3, Pip curled in Diana's lap. Night 5, 2 cubs wrestling nearby while Diana supervised. Night 8, all 5 sleeping in a pile around her. Night 12, Diana teaching them what looked like basic commands using clicking sounds and hand gestures. "You trained them." "I socialized them," Diana corrected. "There's a difference. Training is making them do what you want. Socialization is teaching them how to function in a world that isn't trying to kill them." A soft chime interrupted them, Dr. Fulton's identification code requesting emergency entry. Tobias hit the door release, and the station's xenobiology lead came skittering in on too many legs, his translator box clicking frantically. "Is it true?" Fulton's mechanical voice carried an edge of panic mixed with something that might have been hope. "A human bonded with the cubs? With my cubs?" "Your cubs tried to disembowel your last assistant," Tobias pointed out, "because Henrik's approached them wrong. Korvathi pack dynamics require—" Fulton's multiple eyes swiveled to focus on Diana, his antennae quivering. You're the maintenance technician. You've been entering the nursery without authorization." "Guilty," Diana said cheerfully. "For 2 weeks. Give or take. You could have been killed. Should have been killed, statistically speaking. Korvathi cubs in trauma response are documented to attack anything that approaches their space." Fulton moved closer, examining Diana like she was a particularly fascinating specimen. "Yet, they've bonded with you. How?" I asked nicely. Tobias rubbed his temples. "Dr. Fulton, what exactly are we dealing with here? In terms that don't require a xenobiology degree." Fulton's translator hummed thoughtfully. "Korvathi are pack predators. Pack means everything: survival, identity, purpose. These cubs lost their pack, lost their parents in combat, were shipped across the galaxy to a station full of aliens they don't understand, surrounded by scents and sounds that mean nothing to them." His primary eyes fixed on Diana. "They've been grieving, refusing to form new pack bonds because, from their perspective, every adult they meet is a stranger trying to replace their dead parents." "But she's a stranger too," Tobias said. "She's a stranger who sat with them in their grief," Fulton replied. "Who didn't demand acceptance, didn't try to force pack structure. She offered presence without expectation. That's remarkably sophisticated interspecies emotional intelligence." Diana shrugged. "I've worked with traumatized animals before. Wolves, mostly. But the principles are the same. You can't force trust. You offer safety and wait." "Wolves," Fulton repeated. "You're comparing Korvathi to Earth predators." "Pack hunters, territorial, complex social structures, communicate through vocalizations and body language." Diana counted off on her fingers. "Yeah, pretty similar conceptually. Obviously different in specifics, but the emotional needs are universal. Kids need to feel safe. Doesn't matter how many legs they have." Tobias's comm unit erupted with an incoming priority signal. Commander Phineas, whose timing was always impeccable in the worst possible way. "Huxley, my office. Now. Bring the human." The commander's voice carried that special quality of barely contained hysteria that came from dealing with potential interstellar incidents before his morning stimulants kicked in. "And tell Dr. Fulton to come too. We've got a situation." "What kind of situation?" Tobias asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. "The kind where the Korvathi ambassador just arrived on station unannounced and is demanding to see the human who's been, and I quote, corrupting our young." Tobias closed his eyes. Of course the ambassador was here, because this day wasn't complicated enough already. "Corrupting?" Diana frowned. "I taught them to eat without fighting and sleep through the night. That's the opposite of corruption." "Try explaining that to Ambassador Ixthral," Phineas snapped. "He's currently in the docking bay with an honor guard, and he looks ready to declare war over child care practices. So move it." The calm went dead. Tobias, Diana, and Fulton exchanged glances. "Well," Diana said, standing up and stretching, "this should be interesting." Tobias wondered, not for the first time that night, if it was too late to transfer to a nice, quiet posting. Maybe somewhere without aliens, or politics, or impossibly reckless humans, who befriended apex predators. Then again, where was the fun in that? Commander Phineas's office occupied prime real estate on the station's command level, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Threshold rotating below like a massive, politically contentious marble. Normally, Tobias appreciated the view. Right now, he was too busy watching Ambassador Ixthral loom in the center of the room like a particularly angry mountain that had learned to walk. The Korvathi ambassador stood nearly 3 meters tall on his hind legs, his midnight fur threaded with silver that marked age and status. Scars crisscrossed his muzzle and chest. Battle records that Tobias definitely didn't want to hear the stories behind. His eyes burned molten gold, fixed on Diana with an intensity that made Tobias's hand drift instinctively toward his sidearm. Not that a pistol would do much against a fully grown Korvathi warrior, but the gesture was comforting nonetheless. "This is the human?" Ixthral's voice rumbled through his translator, a bass growl that vibrated through Tobias's sternum. "This small, fragile thing has been touching our cubs?" "With respect, Ambassador," Commander Phineas said, his voice pitched slightly too high. "The human in question is a station employee who... I asked her." Ixthral's attention never wavered from Diana, who stood her ground despite being roughly a third of his size and approximately 1,000% more likely to become a light snack. "Speak, human. Explain why you violated our territory, approached our young without permission, contaminated them with your alien scent." Diana met his glowing stare without flinching, which was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Because they were crying, and nobody else was doing anything about it. Silence fell like a physical weight. Tobias saw Phineas's face cycle through several shades of panic. Even Fulton's antennae flattened against his head. "They were crying," Ixthral repeated slowly, each word carefully enunciated through the translator. "Every night, I could hear them from the corridor. Distress calls, if I'm identifying the vocalizations correctly." Diana crossed her arms. "So I went in, sat with them, let them know they weren't alone. You endangered yourself for cubs that are not your pack, not even your species." "Yeah, I did, because that's what you do when kids are hurting." Something shifted in Ixthral's posture. Not aggression exactly, but a recalibration of expectations. His head tilted, studying Diana with what might have been curiosity. "You call them kids. That's what they are, aren't they? Children who lost their parents, lost their home, got shipped to a space station where everything smells wrong and sounds wrong and nobody speaks their language. Diana's voice softened. They're not weapons or political assets. They're traumatized kids who needed someone to care. Tobias watched the ambassador's claws flex, scoring marks into the deck plating. Not threatening, processing. Behind the massive alien's shoulder, he caught Phineas making frantic, "Shut up, shut up, shut up!" gestures at Diana, who either didn't notice or didn't care. Their parents, Ixthral said quietly, died defending human colonists from raiders. 32 humans lived because 2 Korvathi warriors chose to fight, chose to hold the line until reinforcements arrived. Diana's expression crumbled slightly. I didn't know that. Why would you? You are maintenance. You fix broken machines, not broken hearts. Ixthral moved to the window, his bulk blocking out half the view of Threshold. The cubs rejected every handler we sent. Korvathi caretakers, experienced warriors who knew our ways. They saw them as strangers trying to replace their fallen pack. Bit, clawed, refused food. We thought them beyond help. They weren't beyond help, Diana said firmly. They were grieving. There's a difference. Show me. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and a plea rolled into one. Ambassador? Phineas squeaked. Show you what, exactly? I will see this bond myself. If this human truly understands Korvathi young, she will demonstrate. Ixthral turned back to face them, his translator catching the edge of his growl. During feeding time, Fulton's translator box made a sound like choking. Ambassador, with all respect, feeding time is when the cubs are most aggressive, most dangerous. We've lost. I am aware of the risks, Doctor. That is precisely why I choose this test. Those golden eyes fixed on Diana again. Korvathi cubs in feeding frenzy have killed trained warriors. If you can handle them during their meal, then perhaps this bond is legitimate. If not, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Diana met Tobias's gaze, and he saw something fierce and stubborn burning there. When do we start? Now, Ixthral said. I am not a patient male. 20 minutes later, Tobias found himself standing in the nursery observation room, separated from the main space by reinforced transparent aluminum that could supposedly withstand direct plasma fire. He wasn't entirely convinced it could withstand 5 hungry Korvathi cubs, but here they were anyway. Medical team on standby. Check. Emergency containment protocols loaded. Check. His career prepared to implode spectacularly, regardless of outcome. Check and check. Diana stood in the nursery proper, wearing protective padding that Fulton had insisted on. Not that it would do much against Korvathi claws, but it made the doctor feel better about facilitating potential manslaughter. She'd pulled her hair back into a tight braid, and her expression carried the calm focus of someone who'd done this 100 times before, just never with aliens capable of tearing through bulkheads. The cubs clustered near the back wall, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with agitation. They could smell the raw meat being prepared, synth protein molded into something approximating their natural prey, enhanced with necessary nutrients. Tobias watched their claws extend, their muscles coil, their eyes fix on the feeding troughs with predatory intensity. This is a terrible idea, he muttered into his comm. Noted and logged, Phineas replied from the command center, his voice tight with stress. Ambassador Ixthral insisted. We're not exactly in a position to refuse. Through the other observation window, Tobias could see Ixthral watching with absolute stillness, his translator silent, his attention total. Fulton's voice crackled through the intercom. Diana, we're releasing the food now. Remember, if they become aggressive, Activate your emergency beacon, and we'll flood the room with sedative gas." "That won't be necessary," Diana said calmly, positioning herself near the feeding troughs as they rose from the floor panels laden with meat. The cubs moved as one, a coordinated rush that was all instinct and hunger and barely leashed violence. Tobias's hand slammed the emergency override, and Diana made a single sharp clicking sound. 5 cubs stopped mid-charge, skidding on the deck plating. "Sit," she said in Korvathi, the word accompanied by a hand gesture. They sat, all of them, even the scarred elder who'd supposedly mauled his last 3 handlers. Tobias's jaw dropped. Beside him in the observation room, Fulton made a sound like a deflating accordion. Diana walked calmly to the first trough, selected a portion of meat, and held it up. "Pip, come." The smallest cub, white patch bright against her dark fur, approached slowly, controlled, her movements precise despite the hunger blazing in her eyes. She took the meat gently from Diana's hands, retreating to her designated spot to eat. "Huntress, your turn." The second largest cub, a female with distinctive stripe patterns, followed the same protocol. Controlled approach, gentle take, retreat to eat. "You taught them turns," Tobias breathed. "You taught apex predators to take turns." Diana continued the process with mechanical precision, calling each cub by name, names she'd apparently given them, names they responded to like they'd always been theirs. Pip, Huntress, Forge, Talon, and finally the scarred elder she called Sentinel. Sentinel approached last, and Tobias saw the difference in him. Older, warier, carrying trauma that went deeper than the scars on his body. He took his portion but didn't immediately retreat. Instead, he pressed his massive head against Diana's side, that diesel engine purr rumbling through the observation room's audio pickups. Diana scratched behind his ears, murmuring something too soft for the microphones to catch. "How long have they been doing this?" Fulton whispered, his translator barely functioning through what Tobias suspected was complete scientific meltdown. "Every night, apparently," Tobias replied, watching Diana supervise the feeding like she'd been born to it. "She's been training them for 2 weeks, and none of us knew." "Not training," came Ixthral's voice through the comm, surprising everyone. "Teaching. There is a difference, as your Dr. Fulton would say. Training is domination. Teaching is cooperation." In the nursery, one of the cubs, Forge, if Tobias had the names right, started approaching another's food. Diana made a warning click, and Forge immediately backed off, returning to his own trough. "They respect her," Ixthral continued, his voice carrying something that might have been wonder. "Not from fear, from trust. She has shown them pack law, human style." The feeding continued without incident. No fighting, no aggression, just 5 cubs eating their meals, while a human woman supervised with the casual confidence of someone who'd done this so many times it had become routine. When they finished, Diana collected the empty troughs, stacking them methodically. The cubs gathered around her, their patterns shifting to soft blue. Contentment, Tobias remembered from the briefing files. The color of safety and pack. Then Pip made a distressed sound, stumbling slightly. Diana's demeanor changed instantly, going from casual to laser-focused. She knelt beside the small cub, running her hands over Pip's body with practiced efficiency. "She's running hot. Fever, I think." Her breathing's labored. "Get her out of there," Phineas ordered. "Not yet." Diana continued her examination, feeling along Pip's throat and chest. "Fulton, I need a medical scanner. Something's wrong." The other cubs clustered closer, protective. their patterns shifting toward aggressive orange. They sensed their packmates' distress, and their body language screamed potential violence. "Diana, you need to leave now," Tobias said into the comm. "Before they—" "I'm not leaving her." Diana's voice carried absolute certainty. "She's sick, and she's scared. Medical team, get in here, now." Fulton was already moving, his many legs carrying him into the nursery, with a medical kit clutched in his forward appendages. He approached slowly, aware that 5 pairs of eyes tracked his every movement. Diana made soothing sounds in Corvathi, keeping one hand on Pip while gesturing for the others to stay back. They obeyed, though their patterns remained orange, watchful. The medical scanner hummed over Pip's small body, and Fulton's translator clicked urgently. "Respiratory infection. Early stage, but progressing fast. Another day, maybe 2, and it would have been critical." "Can you treat it?" Diana demanded. "Yes, but how did you know? The symptoms are barely visible." She didn't eat her full portion. Pip always finishes her food. And yesterday she was less active during playtime, more clingy. Diana stroked the cub's head gently. "I've been tracking their behaviors. Individual patterns. You notice when something changes." Tobias watched from the observation room as Fulton administered medication, as Diana comforted a sick cub while 4 others maintained protective vigil, and realized something profound had shifted. This wasn't just about one reckless human anymore. This was about connection, understanding, bridge building across species that had never fully trusted each other. And Diana had done it by accident, simply because she'd heard children crying and decided to help. "Bring her to my office," Ixthral's voice rumbled through the comm. "When the cub is stable. We must talk." The ambassador's tone had changed. No longer accusatory, no longer threatening. Something else entirely. Something that might have been hope. Ixthral's temporary quarters aboard Lighthouse Keeper were sparse. Functional furniture scaled for his massive frame, minimal decoration, weapons mounted on the walls in traditional Corvathi fashion. Tobias stood near the door, officially present as security, but mostly just trying to stay out of the way while history potentially rewrote itself in real time. Diana sat across from the ambassador, looking tiny in the oversized chair, but maintaining that same unshakable composure she'd shown throughout this entire circus. Pip dozed in her lap, the medication already working, her bioluminescent patterns soft and steady. "You saved her life," Ixthral said, his translator rendering the Corvathi words with unexpected gentleness. The medical team confirmed. 2 more days untreated, and the infection would have been fatal. "I just noticed she was off," Diana replied, scratching Pip's ears. Anyone paying attention would have caught it. But no one was paying attention. Not like you do. Ixthral leaned forward, his golden eyes reflecting the station's lighting. "You track their individual behaviors, know their preferences, their personalities. You treat them as people, not specimens. Because they are people. Small, furry, extra-limbed people, but people." A sound emerged from Ixthral's chest, a rumbling that Tobias initially mistook for aggression until he realized it was laughter. Actual Corvathi laughter, which sounded disturbingly like an avalanche clearing its throat. "I came here expecting to find corruption," the ambassador said. "A human overstepping boundaries, potentially harming our young through ignorance or malice. Instead, I find someone who has accomplished what our finest caretakers could not." He paused, his claws drumming against the armrest. "You have given them pack again. I just spent time with them. You did far more than that." Ixthril rose, moving to the window overlooking the station's docking bay. Diana Hunt, I have a proposal. One that will sound absurd, impossible, perhaps offensive to your human sensibilities. Hit me with it, Diana said, which made Tobias wince because idioms definitely didn't translate well. These cubs need a guardian, someone who understands them, who they trust, who can help them heal and eventually integrate into Korvathi society. Ixthril turned back to face her. I want you to become their official pack leader. Silence. Tobias felt his brain stutter over the implications. Pack leader, Diana repeated carefully. As in? You would come to our homeworld, train in our customs, learn our language properly, understand our pack structures. The cubs would remain with you throughout their development, a process lasting years. Eventually, you would help them find their place among our people, whether as warriors, scholars, or whatever path they choose. You want me to raise them, Korvathi cubs, on an alien planet, for years. Yes. Diana looked down at Pip, who'd started snoring softly, then back up at Ixthril. That's insane. Completely, the ambassador agreed. No human has ever been accepted as Korvathi pack. Our people are proud, territorial, and many will reject the idea of an alien raising our young. You will face hostility, isolation, constant scrutiny. His expression shifted into something that might have been a smile, if it didn't involve quite so many teeth. But you have already done the impossible. Why stop now? Ambassador, Phineas interjected nervously from his position near the door. Surely there are diplomatic protocols, cultural exchange agreements, legal frameworks that need to be— I am tired of protocols, Ixthril said, not unkindly. My people are dying, not from war anymore, but from isolation. We have become so insular, so focused on our own superiority, that we have forgotten how to connect with others, how to build bridges instead of walls. He looked at Diana with something approaching desperation. These cubs, their parents died protecting humans. They have bonded with a human. This is a sign, if we are wise enough to read it. Fulton's translator hummed thoughtfully. From a xenobiological perspective, the success rate would be— I don't care about success rates, Ixthril interrupted. I care about possibility, about trying something different instead of watching our culture calcify into irrelevance. Tobias cleared his throat. Sir, with respect, this seems like a decision that requires significant consideration. Maybe Diana needs time to— I'll do it, Diana said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. You'll— What? Phineas managed. I'll do it. I'll go to your homeworld, learn your ways, help raise these cubs. Diana's voice strengthened with certainty. But I have conditions. Ixthril's ears perked forward. Name them. First, I maintain contact with humans. Regular communication, no isolation. Second, if the cubs want to visit human space when they're older, that's allowed. Third, I get final say in their care and development. No overruling me because tradition says otherwise. She met the ambassador's glowing gaze. And fourth, if this doesn't work, if they decide they want a Korvathi guardian instead, we transition them with zero guilt or blame. Their choice matters most. Acceptable, Ixthril said immediately. Though I suspect once they are older, they will choose to stay with the strange human who taught them that love crosses species boundaries. One more thing. Diana's expression turned serious. Why are you really doing this? It's not just about the cubs. The ambassador was quiet for a long moment, his patterns shifting through colors Tobias didn't recognize. I had offspring, 2 sons. They died in the same battle that orphaned these cubs, died buying time for human evacuation transports to escape. His voice roughened. I wanted to hate humans for it. Wanted to blame your species for needing rescue, for being weak, for costing me my children. He moved back to the window, his massive frame silhouetted against the stars. But my sons chose to fight, chose to protect those who could not protect themselves. That is the Korvathi way. Pack extends to those who need protection, regardless of species. Ixthral's shoulders sagged slightly. When I heard these cubs had bonded with a human, I thought it betrayal. Then I realized it was exactly what my sons would have wanted. Connection, understanding, a future where our peoples stand together instead of apart. Diana stood, carefully settling the sleeping Pip onto the chair cushion. She walked over to Ixthral, this tiny human woman approaching a massive alien warrior without fear. I'm sorry for your loss, and I promise I'll take care of them. Help them grow into warriors their parents would be proud of. Ixthral looked down at her, and Tobias saw something shift in those ancient eyes. You already have. 3 months later, Tobias stood in the departure lounge, watching Diana corral 5 increasingly energetic cubs toward the boarding ramp. They'd grown noticeably, their movements more coordinated, their patterns more complex. Pip still had her white patch, still stuck closest to Diana, but all of them moved with the confidence of young creatures who knew they were loved. You've got the emergency beacon? Tobias asked for the 3rd time. Right here. Diana patted her jacket pocket. Stop worrying. I'll be fine. You're going to an alien planet to raise apex predators. Yeah, and it'll be amazing. She grinned, that same reckless smile that had gotten her into this situation in the first place. Besides, someone has to show the galaxy that different doesn't mean dangerous. Fulton skittered over, pressing a data chip into her hand. Complete medical protocols for all 5 cubs. Update me weekly on their development. This is unprecedented research, and I will not... Weekly updates. Got it. Diana pocketed the chip. At the boarding ramp, Ixthral waited with his honor guard, looking surprisingly patient as the cubs investigated every surface of the shuttle. Diana Hunt, are you ready? As I'll ever be. Tobias watched her walk toward the shuttle, 5 cubs bouncing around her like protective satellites, their purrs audible even from the lounge. Ixthral fell into step beside her, and for just a moment, they looked like what they were, a makeshift family heading toward an uncertain future with nothing but hope and stubbornness to guide them. Think she'll actually pull this off? Phineas asked, appearing at Tobias's shoulder. She befriended murder cubs by ignoring every safety protocol and common-sense warning we have, Tobias replied. At this point, I wouldn't bet against her doing anything. The shuttle sealed, lifted, and disappeared into the star-scattered black. Tobias raised his coffee in silent salute. Good luck, you magnificent disaster. Somewhere in the vast machinery of the galaxy, protocols were being rewritten, diplomatic channels were lighting up with frantic communications, and history was being made by one stubborn human who'd heard children crying and decided rules were optional. Security had found her napping in the nursery, cubs grooming her hair. Now she was heading off to become a legend.